Emergency podcast territory. Sandy Alcantara is on the mound. He is on the mound for the jumbo shrimp. Craig Mish is in the house. This is Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England and welcome to Locked On Marlins. This is your daily Marlins podcast. I am your host, Peter Pratt. Hit me up, of course, at Miami Marlins_UK. If you listen to the pod, of course, hit subscribe. It's your team every day. And thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day. There is a YouTube channel. I recommend you head on over there, hit subscribe too. That YouTube channel is called Locked On Marlins. You see what we did there. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. You can download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Welcome, guys, to the off day episode, an emergency podcast episode, Thursday, the 21st of September, and the GOAT is in the house. Craig Mish. Craig, how we doing, brother?
Doing great, Pete. Good to catch up with you. It's been a bit.
Yeah, it has.
It's been a while, right?
Yeah. It has. Way too long. But as we sit here, Craig, 9 games to go. Marlins half a game back in the wild card. It feels like a great time to talk as a Marlins fan. So, I don't know how we've got here. There's been 14 games over 500. There's been some voodoo. There's all sorts going on, but they are in the thick of it right now. And, listen, as Marlins fans, both of us are, what a time to be alive in many ways. We haven't had this for so long, other than maybe 2020, which was a different situation. But, yeah, this is fun. The Marlins, it's fair to say after the deadline, they've been kind of piecing things together rotation-wise, I would say, very much so. They didn't get a starter at the deadline, which I think was interesting. Obviously couldn't find a deal on that one, but Sandy going down was a huge blow. But the big news, Sandy Alcantara making the start, a rehab start this evening for the jumbo shrimp. Looks like he's trying to kind of work his way through, muscle through it, if that's the right description, probably the wrong description. But what can you update us with on this one, Craig? Because, this is, Sandy is leaving it all on the field here, I think.
Yeah, well, as we're recording this, he's about to pitch. So clearly, at the moment we're discussing this, we don't have the results of the AAA appearance that he's making. But I do think that the way that he is looking at it, and again, this is just my speculation only, is that if he can pitch, he wants to help the team get to the postseason, even if he's 90% Sandy or 80% Sandy. Because I think what we have to do a little bit is we have to be honest with ourselves that no matter what Sandy we see, even if he has a 100% Sandy performance, he is not at 100%. He could be close, but this is, I would not anticipate 115 pitches being thrown in a game from him. No. Maybe he will. What do I know? But I just think that this is who he is. The team around him is falling, piece by piece here. And he probably, as the elder statesman and one of the leaders of the team, is not going to let this go down without a fight. And at the very least, from optics, let's get him on the mound in a AAA game. Let's see if he can start a major league game. And and he may be the best option that they have currently in the organization to throw a pitch on the mound in a big game, even if he, again, is not at 100%. So we're going to have to see how this all works out. I would put no guarantees on anything at this point, meaning that I could see him going out and throwing a shutout. I could see him going out and maybe it not going well. Nobody knows. And we are all going to find out together in this. There's no playbook for this. The best thing that I could tell you is look, Sandy's a much better pitcher than Tony Gonsolin, but Tony Gonsolin since June knew that he had an issue and just kept going and going and going and going. And look, again, not the caliber of pitcher of Sandy here, but he kept going until he knew he couldn't go anymore. I don't know what Sandy's choice is going to be here, but the choice he's made now very clearly and obviously is forget everything else. The priority is getting in the postseason, and if I'm on this team, I gotta try and get my team to the postseason. At least that's my take on at least the attempt that's going on right now.
Yeah, it makes sense, and you've got to tip your cap to Sandy on that. But thinking a little bit further in advance, which clearly this is a win now decision almost with Sandy, but what's the risk factor here, do we think, heading into 24 in terms of, Sandy's availability, let's say, and maybe, what that could look like, I guess?
Yeah, look, I mean, I've outlined, a few scenarios previously. This was the first option, which is basically
Mhm.
takes a little time and comes off. The second option was the one that I thought was potentially going to happen, which is he would take extended time off and then see, how things looked in a month or two from now, which is, generally what happens with a lot of these situations with these pitchers that have the issue that he has is they take, extended time off, they go back in, they see what the healing process looks like and then they make the decision as to how to move forward. I guess, Pete, that could still happen now, technically,
Mhm.
where he could pitch a couple of weeks and then at the end of the season, then take some more time off and then decide what to do in a few weeks from now. And then obviously the scenario that does happen sometimes in these situations is guys sometimes do have surgery. Now, I don't know which direction this is going to go, and I don't know what that MRI is going to look like in 3 weeks from now or a month from
Mm.
now. But I suppose in a best case scenario, he is just Sandy and his life just goes on. But generally speaking, that's not usually how this works. And
No.
eventually something has to happen. But maybe it doesn't this time. I don't know. There are examples of players who have had this and just, worked right through it. But most of the examples are not that.
Mm.
So we will see. But I would say that Pete, I don't think that there would be any longer term ramifications from it. And if we've dropped some of the best case scenario. We can now, hypothetically drop some of the worst case scenario is what happens if something is genuinely really wrong and he
Mm.
does have to have surgery. What would be the difference between having it on October 8th as opposed to September 27th? Probably no difference, honestly, Pete. And I
Mm.
could probably even go as far as to say, what would be the difference if he did it in November? As opposed to doing it on October the 8th. You're still not going to see him next year if he chooses to go this route, which again, I don't know that he will or not.
Mm.
So I don't see a ton of risk here
Mhm.
outside of the obvious risk. You're asking this man to go pitch in the most important game of the season, and we don't know what's going to happen here. And then it could be
Mm.
3 innings in, and we're all looking like, we could look at, oh my gosh, he's the best. He's a warrior. He went out there, he won, and the Marlins in the postseason. The other alternative is we're all going to play that Monday morning quarterback and go, oh my gosh, what did they do? They pitched him in a
Mm.
game he shouldn't have pitched. So this is like a complete guessing game here as to the way that this is going to all shake out. But I don't think that there's any further damage to this. It's just a matter of if he chose to go that route of potentially missing next year, which obviously nobody wants to see.
No.
I don't think that it makes any difference. Now, I would tell you this: something in January or February potentially affects 2 years.
Yeah.
So there's a big difference there once we get to that point.
Yeah, makes sense. What happens, just thinking about a couple of situations here, what happens if the Brewers this weekend completely blow the Marlins away? They sweep the Marlins. All of a sudden, the wild card situation looks a little bit more dicey
Yeah.
than maybe it does right now. Does that maybe factor into how they manage both Sandy, and I'd also factor Eury Perez into that conversation too?
I think that's the next question to ask, so it's a good one from you. It seems to me that he wouldn't be going to AAA to do this, Pete, and get a good result to not pitch in a game next week. So
Mm.
my assumption is what you're saying could very well happen. Let's assume for a minute, I think objectively that the Marlins are able to win one of the 3 games against
Mhm.
Milwaukee this weekend. Because again, every time their back has been so far against the wall, they've pushed right back and gotten out of this thing. So let's assume that they win at least one. If they get swept, you bring up a good point. I think that if Sandy comes out of the rehab start good, that I think he's going to start in a game next week. I really do.
Mhm.
But, Pete, what would happen if he's lined up to pitch the last game of the season, which it does appear as what they're trying to do? They get to that Sunday. If they need him, then he probably goes. But
Mm.
if they don't, what sense would that make to pitch him in the last game of the season? So at least that's me extrapolating this thing and looking forward. But so much can happen between now and then. It is a tough call. I think in the end, what we could say is Sandy is truly a one of a kind type guy because there aren't many guys in this scenario that are going to put the team first like this before the health. And clearly Sandy is going to be a free agent again and not that long from now. And
Yeah.
then that has to factor into this equation too. And we're not even hearing anything about that. But let's be real. If he misses 2024, then he's got to get right in 25 to be like Superman again in 26. And then here we go again with Sandy. So, I think that has to be, thought about a little bit as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I also want to carry on the conversation around Eury Perez. I do also interested about that final game, that 162. Like you said, Sandy potentially, it could line up where he could be in that spot. The
Right.
question would then be, do they maybe hold him back and try to find another way through? We don't know the situation at that point clearly, but do they hold him back and maybe save him for the first game in the postseason if indeed they're in? I guess at that point. So a lot of ifs, buts, and maybes at this point, right? But
yeah, we would have to see him next week in New York pitch. And then clearly, if we were doing this then, we would have a better indication as to what to say. Because if he goes out, he pitches 8 innings, he gives up a run and strikes out 7, you're going to, I think, Pete, you have to want him in the deciding game at that point. If it's not that 8-inning, 1-inning scenario, then I think you go into that Sunday thinking, well, maybe let's have him go at some point, game 1, game 2, or game 3 of the wild card.
Yeah. All right, we'll carry on the conversation here. I did want to ask you about Eury Perez too, because after his start yesterday and some of the post-game comments, I'm very intrigued to see how the Marlins manage Eury Perez too. But this episode is brought to you by our good friends over at Gametime. And buying tickets to your favorite events, it shouldn't be stressful. Listen, it probably isn't if you're trying to go to Marlins games, but Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. And they've got killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guaranteed. Stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. You don't have to plan months in advance. You don't have to. They've got deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. So all you have to do to snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime is download the Gametime app. Create an account and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, guys. Thanks for joining me, Peter Pratt, and Craig Mish on Thursday's episode of Locked On Marlins. We've had some good news around Sandy Alcantara. We don't know the results of the news, but Sandy is pitching for the Jumbo Shrimp this evening, pretty much right now, as we're recording, actually, pretty much. So we'll see how that goes. But Craig, I did want to ask you about Eury Perez. Went in yesterday's game, didn't go deep into the game in terms of innings anyway. Post-game comments, for the first time, I would say, we started to hear from Eury Perez that he's feeling it, potentially.
Yeah.
Like he's never been at this kind of innings count. He's gone past the number that we all had on him early in the year. He's had to do it. He has done it. Started to show some signs. How do the Marlins manage Eury Perez this rest of the way?
Yeah, and Skip is super transparent with this stuff. And so in post-game, he said that he doesn't think he's fatigued. But let's give some credit to Eury Perez here for a minute. 20 years old, willing to put out how he feels about things going forward. Usually guys like that don't. I think this kid is going to be such a star for the Marlins for a long time. But the reality of the situation is he's been pushed. He's been pushed to the point that very few 20-year-olds have. I watched the start. You watched the start. This was not the Eury Perez that we've seen all season long. It was not close. Very few swings and misses. Arsenal looking a little bit different than it had. His demeanor was the same. I just didn't think that he got the same results. Now, that being said, could they push him one more time and have him make another start against maybe yes. Maybe they really don't have options here. I guess that's really what it comes down to. And then you're looking at maybe 140 innings on the season. Look, they have to find every, avenue and path at this point, Pete, to get to the postseason. And if that requires starting Eury again, then I think that they're probably going to try and do it. But there's no question that at some point soon they're going to have to stop. If the Marlins got to the National League Division Series somehow and ended up getting in the postseason and winning the wild card, I don't know that Eury Perez would pitch in that thing, or maybe an inning or two or something. But it's come to the point where I think it's pretty obvious that he doesn't look the same. So it would probably be in their best interest to have somebody else pitch. But Johnny Cueto clearly is cooked. And Trevor Rogers has not pitched this season.
No.
And, Fulton wasn't able to come up and he got hurt, and Max Meyer did not come back. And it's like, Edward Cabrera finally did have a good start. So maybe that's something to hang your hat on to. But this idea that the Marlins are like super rich and pitching, like, boy, isn't that not accurate. Like they don't have anybody to come up pitch right now. So
No.
they've manufactured it and they've done a good job keeping it going with the openers and Hoeing and Soriano and the middle guys. But it's you know they who are they going to call Madison Bumgarner or something here? Like there's nobody left to start for them. So I think that's kind of the scenario. What we're left with at this point, Pete, is that look in a playoff run where they need a win on Friday night, most important game of the season.
Yeah,
they're using an opener.
Exactly.
I mean, that you can't tell me that you can tell me that the Marlins have a few good pitchers. You cannot tell me that they are rich with starting pitching if they have to start an opener on Friday night in a playoff run against the Milwaukee Brewers. Maybe injuries are the factor here, but clearly we have to take a step back from that, I think, at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that just sums it up, right? Corbin Burns on the mound for the Brewers, an opener for the Marlins, probably with some length from Brian Hoeing after that, or Johnny Cueto. Or
somebody brought up to me, somebody texted me this great question. I thought this was a really interesting question. That, first of all, Luis Ariz has been the best hitter on the Marlins this year, okay? And let's assume he was not hurt. But you had to have one player from right now, through the end of the season. Would it be Luis Ariz or would it be Pablo Lopez?
Oh, boy.
From now until the end, just this season, just from now to the end, Luis would be the best hitter on the Twins or Marlins going right now. But with how desperate the Marlins are for starting pitching, you may say, give me Pablo out there. And that's a credit, by the way, to Pablo's season that he's had too. But I think that trade was so fascinating because both teams did so well with it. Miami got a star. Minnesota got a Cy Young Award candidate here. Like it just shows you when you think you have really good starting pitching and you lose a couple of guys, you really don't.
This is it. It's, the depth gets tested quickly, and all of a sudden you go from studs to, openers. So it's tough for the Marlins. Skip, just thinking about the way he's had to manage this year, the bullpen in particular, but equally like the rotation too. There's been some kamikaze management, I would say, at times with Skip. I think he really pushed the guys early in the year, like he really had to, and he's done a phenomenal job here, I would say. And right now with Eury, with Sandy, like it's just pretty much a needs-must situation. You got to think if they do make it in, let's hope they do. In many ways, it feels like they deserve to get in, but the record will determine that. But who's going to be pitching in these postseason games? It's going to be truly fascinating. No,
I don't know. I mean, I look. First of all, the most improved player on the Marlins this year, we can give the award out. We could have given it out a long time ago. It's Braxton Garrett, without a doubt. I mean, without even a question. But Pete, Braxton Garrett is going into, if they make the postseason, he's either your game 1 or game 2 starter.
He is
in the postseason. There's no way we would have had that at the beginning of the season. There's just no chance of that. I mean, you could be looking at Luzardo, Garrett, and Cabrera as your postseason guys. And look, Luzardo was always sort of at the top, but even he's had his bumps throughout the season too. So it's really, you're right. It is a credit to Skip that they've gotten this far with what they have. And clearly this weekend, when they face the Brewers, they're going in on the adverse side of this with the pitching that the Brewers have, and Miami with, again, a ton of all of a sudden now a ton of injuries.
Yeah, for sure. I want to talk about those injuries, plus some attendance conversations, and also a little bit of Bruce Sherman Kimang conversation as well after the final out of the day. And it's our good friends over at FanDuel, guys. And you can snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. Sounds sensational. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is easy to use, and it's got a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, guys, final segment here with myself, Peter Pratt, and Craig Mish. Craig, Luis Ariz, we were just talking about him then. To your point, and that question asked, it's a great one. Who would the Marlins need, and who would they want to have, Ariz or Pablo at this point?
Yes, somebody asked me And
Yeah,
he
absolutely.
texted me like, "What would you do right now?" And
Yeah.
I didn't even think of it. And I was like, "Well, I mean, I mean, I don't know." Like, I mean, Luis is gonna get 3 hits in any game he plays in,
Mm.
but who's driving him in type thing. Meanwhile, hold on a second. You're telling me Pablo comes back and starts game 1 of the postseason?
Yeah.
Starts
Sounds pretty
game
valuable.
163? Yeah, it was a great question. Anyway, sorry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, but the reality is Arias, he makes this offense tick, and so the Marlins win games when Arias is out out the lineup,
Oh
the
yeah.
Marlins offense
They won
struggles. No
without
doubt.
him too the other day.
They did. They did. And you were saying about just imagine how wild it is. We had Braxton Garrett going in game 1. Looking at the start of the year, would we have ever thought that? No. Would we have
Never.
also thought that Tanner Scott would have been the closer? No, we
Oh,
wouldn't have
never.
thought that either. So,
Never. Well,
you know,
I never thought that, but
no way. I know.
I was proven wrong. I was proven wrong in a big way on that one. He's been fantastic, and
Yeah, he has.
obviously that guy's got to get right here now.
He
Down the
does.
stretch. Yeah.
He does, for sure. Any latest on Luis Arias? I did see knocking around. I think he's got his family over for this weekend series, actually. So he's got his 200 hits. He's got his family over. To me, that's probably a good indicator that Luis Arias will likely return for this Brewers series. Any insight from your side?
Not really. I would not guarantee him back on Friday. I'm not sure.
Mm,
Um, I think he's going to come back this season, but I can't. I really don't know, to be honest with you. I don't really know the situation, but at least from discussions that I've had, it's still a matter of a question. I think
okay.
going. I think he'll play this weekend at some point, but I can't say that he's back tomorrow night. I just don't know.
No. Jake Berger, anything on him? He
Same
exited the
thing.
game yesterday. Same?
Same thing.
Oh, boy.
Again, it's a quad situation. Look, I know this is going to sound crazy because you can't play this way, and we could play this in fantasy football and fantasy baseball. We can't play this in reality baseball.
Mhm.
But Pete, if you knew you were getting Arias and Berger back on Saturday at 100%, with this opener on Friday night,
Yeah.
and you told me you could win Saturday and Sunday and just punt Friday, I know that would never happen, but I would take it. I just would take it, and I think they both want to come back and they both want to play. They're going to be, as we know, probably a massive underdog, maybe one of the biggest at home all season on Friday night with whoever they start. Hoeing, I don't know. I'm guessing. I don't know. I don't think that's been announced, so I don't know. I don't
No.
know the answer to that, but it does feel like they should be rooting hard for Milwaukee to just wrap this up, so maybe they can take a step back because the Brewers' offense hasn't been great, but Christian Yelich is expected, I believe, to return this weekend for them as well. It feels to me, Pete, like the Brewers are pushing the foot down on the pedal as hard as they can this weekend to
Right.
get it wrapped up because they don't want to have to play anybody next week, give everybody a break, and then go into the postseason 1, 2, and 3 with those 3 guys. The other issue with that, Pete, is that if somehow the Marlins are behind the Cubs going into the last week of the season, the Brewers play the Cubs next Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I got to tell you, it's not a matter of integrity. I think the Brewers are going to sit everybody next weekend before they play that series against Miami or Chicago. Imagine them thinking we may have to play the Cubs. Why would we show anything against these guys for a few days? So that's major concern, I think, for the Marlins. Marlins must be ahead of the Cubs going into next Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. They got to be ahead of them. If they're tied or they're behind, it's very dangerous.
They're exposed for sure. I was looking at the same. I'm interested about the Diamondbacks too. I know they've had a decent run. They've got themselves, a game and a half, maybe, I think, on the Marlins at this point. But
I think it's 2.
Is it 2 at this point? I think they got the Marlins have the tiebreaker as well against the Diamondbacks, so that does
They
help.
played well against them. Yeah.
Their run in is a little trickier. I was looking at they finish up with the Astros. I think they've got the Yankees on deck. I can't remember who's sandwiched in between. So there's a chance maybe the Diamondbacks, maybe. But to your point, I was looking at that Cubs series against the Brewers and thinking, the Marlins need to be ahead of the Cubs at that point. If they aren't, they're in big trouble. Even though the Marlins are playing the Pirates as we know, but
normally in these situations with 20 games left, there's nothing to talk about. There's 9 games left. If the Marlins finish 1 game better than Arizona, the rest of the way they're out.
Yeah.
So that's how thin, like a razor, this is. That loss against the Mets on Wednesday night was a very tough loss. They cannot get swept by the Brewers this weekend. I don't think they must win a game.
No doubt. I want to talk about attendances. It's been a topical conversation. It's fair to say, and I put it out there, and I think you've talked about it as well. The attendance for the Mets series stunned me, to be honest with you. Just 10,000 or so, 11,000 average across a 3-game series at home, final homestand in the mix. I was completely stunned by this situation. All the excuses, they continue to resurface, but for me, I was completely stunned.
Yeah.
It's kind of a two-parter here because also thinking about Bruce Sherman, thinking about this club just more generally, like the future of this club, this makes Bruce, Kim's job just so much more difficult as well in what they're trying to achieve if fundamentally the fan base just doesn't come. And it won't even come at this critical moment. This is basically playoff baseball, postseason type baseball where, it's already started, but they're getting 11,000 fans. It's completely stunning to me. What was your take on that whole situation?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I think we're all aware of it. I think it bothered me a little bit to see, I got a lot of respect for Gary Cohen and Keith Hernandez, but it did bother me a little to see that clip just because, I feel like it's like everybody's aware of kind of what the situation is in Miami and just how difficult it has been. And it felt like a little bit of piling on to me. I just was a little upset seeing that. And what can you say? The truth is the truth as far as the fans that are there. But there's really nothing we can do about that. At the same time, I agree with you in the sense that it's got to be frustrating. Okay, they really have done everything they can to make this team good this year. They've pushed all the right buttons. You mentioned Bruce Sherman. I mean, I remember there was a spring training. I think it was like last year or the year before. I'll never forget this, where Bruce Sherman said that if the team was in it at any point to get in the postseason, that he was going to add players and he was going to add salary. And I remember at that time, oh my gosh, everybody was like, it's not. The guy did it. He did it. He went out. He got Josh Bell. They made the trade for Berger. Robertson didn't work out, but they got Robertson too. So it's like, okay, like we got an owner here that says he's going to do something. He ended up doing exactly what he said.
Yeah.
The team, they went into the dump a little bit, then they came right out. They started winning, and like, what more could be done at this point? I mean, I guess they could have been 6 games over, or 7 or 8 instead of 14, and not going down to -1 game under 500. And I think all those things are true. I don't know what the answer is. I've seen some people say, oh, it's like consistent winning. It just seems like, that's another excuse, where the ballpark is. I mean, those things are all true. But at the beginning of the year, if we did a poll and we said, okay, the Marlins are 70, they're 4 games over 500, and the date is September the 18th. How many people show up at the park? Pete, we all would have said 30,000, man.
Yeah.
We all would have said that.
Definitely.
And so I would have been wrong too in that scenario. But my guess is, I'll be wrong again here, but my guess is Saturday is going to be the biggest crowd of the season. I think that they're going to get close to a sellout, and hopefully that will just put away what happened on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. But I'm like you. I was surprised.
Yeah, for sure. Just speaking about Bruce, clearly one of the talk tracks for him heading into this offseason will be Kim Ang and her future with the Marlins. My general sense, based on the comments, I think they appeared in the Herald, if I recall correctly, that they're not going to have any distractions at this point. Looking to not just take any distractions away from the on-field situation. Right. What's your sense here with Kim Ang moving forwards here with the Marlins and Bruce Sherman? Is it likely that there's an extension here with Kim?
I mean, I would think so. I mean, I don't see any reason why there wouldn't be, but again, strange things happen in baseball. I don't ever make any guarantees with this. People have known me long enough that I usually deal, unless it's Sixto Sanchez, I usually don't deal in black and white. I usually deal with like shades of gray here. But I certainly see a scenario where Kim is the general manager next year. I mean, I do think that will be the case. But again, I don't know. I don't know what they are thinking there, and we're just going to have to wait and see together. But clearly, I guess we could just, put the resume together for Kim just based on the last year or two. Virtually every trade that has been made has worked out, and virtually every free agent that has been signed has not. So we're kind of, Garrett Hampson's been good, but we're kind of somewhere in the middle there of having to get that fixed where the trades and the free agents all have to be good. That's not going to be the case. You're hitting 6 out of 10. You're doing a great job, but there's got to be a middle ground here, because in the end, that's money that's being spent, and it's got to be spent to get better players that can perform. And so, the Luis Arias trade is obviously a big win. The Jake Berger trade is clearly a big win. The signing of Garrett Hampson at this point, my gosh, what a valuable player he has been. And that was a big focus of them, by the way. I was like, what is this Garrett Hampson? Who cares about Garrett Hampson? All I wanted to talk about the winter meeting, Pete, was Garrett Hampson. I'm like, all right, fine. They ended up signing Garrett Hampson. I was like, all right, that's nothing. And he worked out too. But, and then the free agents, you have Segura and you have Gurriel. Listen, they're talk so great about Gurriel. I don't know. I feel like he's had 2 big hits all year, Pete. I don't know about you. But
there was one big home run I recall recently. But
he's had a couple big hits. Yeah. He's been great in the clubhouse. I get it, But and then so Segura, Cueto, and Gurriel. I mean, Cueto, my gosh, what a disaster. But that's just kind of the dynamic that it is. So. I think it's a good grade as a general manager at the end of the season, but it's not always the game that we play here in baseball. There's always other factors. So my I don't know how the answer, but my gut tells me that Kim is the general manager of the Marlins next year. That's what my gut is telling me right now.
Yep. Usually your gut is usually on the money, I would say. So let's go with that. We're running out of time. We've run out of time, to be honest, so we better let you get out of here. But it wouldn't be an episode with Craig Mish without asking about the disappearance, the vanishing of Sixto Sanchez. He appeared through an inning, and he's gone. What's happened to Sixto? Where's he gone?
Here's what I'm going to say for the millionth time about Sixto Sanchez. I wish nothing but success for this guy. Like, honestly, like what people think I don't like him or whatever, I have nothing against him. This guy has been always kind to me. He's been always kind to my son, signing autograph. I mean, I wish nothing but the best success, but it's been years since we've seen anything from him now, with the exception of this one appearance. I personally think that eventually maybe he's able to come back. I hope I'm able to eat my words on that stuff. Really. Like, I'm not rooting against this. I love being wrong. I'm gladly wrong. I'm wrong all the time. Not as often as you're wrong, but I am, but I am wrong a lot. I am wrong a lot. I'm not one of those people that has to be right. But that being said, this is the first time that I think the Marlins organization, Pete, has recognized, why are we talking about this guy in the middle of the playoff run? Yeah. Why are we? Oh, he's going to pitch here and he's throwing 94. Move on for now. Focus on these guys on the field. We're spending way too much time talking about a guy that is not going to pitch in the big leagues this year.
That's a good point.
I mean, please.
It's a distraction, right?
At least, he's throwing for 50 feet and 60 feet. You can do that when you're losing 100 games. Yeah. But let's focus on the great things that this is happening. Why don't we talk about Braxton Garrett? Like, come on, or Andrew Nardi. Oh, let's focus all our time on 6. Oh, he's up to 94. Ooh, congratulations, Mazel tov. He's throwing 94. Enough. Let's take it into the offseason, see what happens. Maybe he's able to come back in spring training or something next year. But I personally think that's what's happening. I don't think he's disappeared. I think it's like, all right, we it's enough. He made his appearance. Maybe he'll appear again. I don't know. But I think that's the right path, by the way, to go down here. Jason Latimer's now gone, so I could say anything about him. So I've always, told Jason, who, I miss Jason very much. I still talk to him, is that, like, what are you doing here, man? Like what every homestand we're going to do this with the 60 foot. Why? Just because he's on the 40 man? Like, do we really need updates people want the updates. Nobody, you know why they want them? Because you keep giving them. Take a pause for like 4 months, 5 months. Other teams are not doing this. The Astros are not giving Forrest Whitley updates every 2 weeks. The guy, Forrest Whitley, I thought was going to be a superstar. You'll have to look it up, Pete. Very similar situation as far as being hurt for years. Top prospect, Houston. Every 2 weeks, the reporter's not posting if Forrest Whitley threw from 40 feet, man.
No. It's funny. I haven't heard any Avisel Garcia updates for a while. Other than he's been
Why are we
taking
doing this here, Pete? Why are you doing this to me at the end?
I'm joking. One final one for you, Craig, because we haven't spoken for some time. I need to refresh where your head's at anyway. Are the Marlins making the postseason in 23?
Oh, I've said yes for the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. That Brave series got you going, right?
You know what? The Braves series, that was a clean sweep. I would tell you that in doing some research and asking some questions, I'm not going to say the Braves took the Marlins light at all, but they definitely put some of their different bullpen guys in situations that they've been in before, giving other guys rest. Mm-hmm. Take that for what it is.
Yeah.
But takes nothing away from the Marlins. They deserve to win all 3 of those games. I'm just telling you what, some of the things that I heard. I don't know if the Marlins are going to make it, but I would tell you that I think they have to beat the Brewers this weekend. I mean, I'm sorry to say, after that loss on Wednesday night against the Mets, I think if they only take 1 out of 3 from the Brewers, I don't think that they're going to make it. Yeah. So I think they have to. I know what they're up against it. I think they have to win the series, because I don't think they're going to sweep the Mets in New York next week. No, I don't think so. They may win 2 out of 3. But the Mets are showing you that they are paying back the Marlins for some wounds from the past. They are ready to do that. And obviously this is coming from somebody in that organization, because they played hard, man. They played very, very hard against the Marlins. I anticipate the Mitch Keller maybe even going in game 162 for the Pirates too. These teams are not going to quit. They take pride in being the spoiler. And so I think as a Marlins fan, you have to hope that somehow the Cubs fall apart here this weekend and the Brewers end up somehow clinching, so they get into a Sunday game scenario where maybe, I mean, I guess Peralta still will have to start if he's the starter. Yeah, I think he's a starter Sunday, but I think Miami now has to win 2 out of 3 from Milwaukee, where if they beat the Mets on Wednesday night, I thought, all right, they just win 1 game. That's fine. I don't know if they can do that anymore, Pete. What do you think? I don't know.
I agree. No, I agree. And frankly, as well, it's that back to that foul pole decision as well. Like, could be such a pivotal moment as well. That was game 2, obviously, in the Mets. Like, that Soler home run wasn't a home run, etc.
Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of that too. And honest, that's a bunch of BS. Also, guys, anybody who watched the season knows there's been so many lucky moments for the Marlins over the course of the year.
That definitely has.
Come on. Like, there's been a million, and so that one didn't go their way. Let's just I understand people are upset about that, but that is not why the Marlins are going to make it or not make it. They've had their own share of fortunate things happening. The reason if they don't make it is because they didn't beat the Mets on Wednesday night. That's the reason why. If they don't end up making it, because the reason why I'm saying they have to beat the Brewers 2 out of 3 is because, Pete, I think they need to win 6 games the rest of the season. I think they need to win 6.
Yep.
And so that would be 2 from Milwaukee, 2 from New York, and 2 from Pittsburgh. Just assuming you're sweeping the Pirates is not fair. I mean, the Pirates just beat the Cubs in Chicago. Okay, anybody could beat anybody. And my biggest fear for the Marlins is what we talked about 15 minutes ago. Then I'll stop. My biggest fear is the Brewers play lay down next weekend against the Cubs. That's a team that, by the way, Major League Baseball cannot question the integrity of that, because they know that they're going to be playing next Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So they're not going to say, "Oh, they laid down." They're going to say, "Oh, they're getting rest." Like, they have to do it.
Yeah.
And you would understand it, as opposed to a team that's out of it, just not playing anyone. Yeah. Then you would question it. Like Buck Showalter said, look, when I play against the good teams, I'm going to play the guys. But Craig Counsell would just say, I'm not pitching Peralta or Woodruff or Burns. And I'm not playing Christian Yelich next weekend. And I'm going to give Willy Adames 2 days off. And then, and the Cubs are going to be starting Steele, and they're going to be going after it. So I'll leave you with that.
Yeah.
If the Marlins are a game ahead of the Cubs going into next weekend, the Marlins are making the postseason. If they're behind the Cubs, I don't think they make it.
Seems fair analysis. I like that the magic number in your head is 6 wins over the next
6-6.
9. Like six and you're in. So boy, oh boy, this series is huge. It's a tough ask. It's the toughest ask, to be honest with you, considering the opener, the bullpen game, game 1. Arias is dinged up, Berger's dinged up. Like, this is truly backs against the walls. But as we've seen all year, it's when they come alive. And when the voodoo kicks in.
This is when when they lose 3 out of 4 to Milwaukee and they're done, they sweep the Braves. They're 1 game under 500. I remember texting people, if they lose this game tonight, that's it. They win 4 in a row.
There you go.
So naturally, they're going to beat the Brewers this weekend. They're going to sweep them. They're going to go to New York. They're going to lose 2 out of 3 again. They're going to go to Pittsburgh. They're going to win the first and then lose the next 2. You know, it's like that's and it's been I think it's been a fun, wild year, regardless, with a lot of positives to take away. And I hope that fans take away a lot of the positives too, because you never know when you're going to be back in this spot, and there's no guarantees that this team is going to look like it did next year, like it does right now. There's
no way.
This is baseball. You just don't know, and there's a lot of questions going into next year too.
No, this is what I've been thinking about too, is the fact this team, it feels like so much of the rub of the green, the voodoo stuff has fallen their way this year. All the one-run dubs. And if they don't get in, even having maybe the luckiest season in the history of baseball, you then got to start scratching your head going into next year going, boy, oh boy, what happens if the luck turns again? Is this back to a 75-win team or a 70-win team? Who knows? So a lot can change. A lot does change. Their chances now, and the reality is, going back to where we started, Sandy recognizes that too. And Sandy is willing to put his body on the line to help give them the push that they need. Gotta love Sandy, gotta love the ace, and you gotta love Craig Mish. This has been Locked On Marlins, and we'll look forward to seeing you, of course, tomorrow, because it's a daily pod. We'll see you Friday. Appreciate it, Craig. We'll see you soon, guys.